from an esoteric perspective, Jesus was a real guy, and he did have a physical form as well, and he was on earth to help bring the earth into the right frequency as a spiritual incarnate form. But when they used the word Jesus in Christianity, in the ancient esoteric Gnostic traditions, when they said Jesus, actually Jesus and Yeshua, the real names, which is coming from the word Yahweh, those names, the ancient Hebrew names, were given. Jesus is a name that was given to him, more like a title. It means the enlightened one. So what they really meant when they said Jesus was a synonym for God. And so the name Jesus was actually a synonym for God, and it was a metaphor for God. This is the real meaning of the name Jesus. And he was God, but not as a human form, but as an esoteric, more of an esoteric perspective. So what was meant when they said that Jesus was both man and God, what they meant with that was exactly that. What they were trying to say was that he was basically God incarnate. But what Jesus said was that we all are. So what people take out of context and misunderstand is what the newer testaments and Bible, again, they've rewritten everything, what they are saying. But what Jesus was saying, which is probably what we should listen to, since he's what is written about in this whole, like, the whole book is written about him. So, but let's get into that in later on, because that's a long one. But the main gist of the matter, okay, the main thing is that what Jesus said is that we are all Jesus, basically. We are all half monkey, or you can say half human and half angel, or half God. We are all have one primal aspect and one spiritual aspect, which is what Jesus was trying to say. So let's not get too distracted about all the different later occurrences that twisted his words, and then they twisted her words and his words, and these words got twisted, etc., etc. Because that's in so many ways. That's the what gets us always makes it so hard to discuss and get forward in this, because always, oh, but he said this, and then they changed this chapter, and etc., and then you get into like an infinite cycle. So what I really think was going on there is what the man himself said, which is that we have both sides. And I think this was I know that this was an important part of his teaching and of his life as well, because this is almost the pinnacle of Christianity, is that he was half human and half divinity, and he was teaching this to people, that you can get in touch with this divinity, but all you have to do is disassociate from the lower aspects of yourself. And he was teaching people not to grasp on to the lower aspects, because the lower aspects would get hold of you, your desires, and it would turn you into a monster. And this is where the devil comes into it. So the story of the devil is an archetype of the ego, and we all know what the ego is in traditional spiritual sense. But what was conveyed as the devil was the ego personified. Not even personified. Originally, Gnostically, it was intended to understand the devil as the ego. And of course the devil is an illusion, as we all know, and so is the ego. So that's why the concept of the devil is important to learn, because you understand that it means the ego, and both are illusions because they're synonyms, and they are pointing to the illusion of the self. So essentially, Jesus' teachings were exactly the same as the teachings of the Buddha, the teachings of later on, or actually before Advaita, the teachings of Hinduism. And as we know, the non-dual teachings of Hinduism were the main teaching which later on has shaped the whole nation of India, especially Varanasi and other holy capital cities. It's turned them into this colorful, vibrant, spiritual hub of culture, where when you are in India and you see the old people, the beggars, you see all kinds of people, and you see them all having this deep understanding that everything is one, and that is so ingrained into them. So it's very easy to see how these non-dual teachings were so beautifully written into the culture from. So how do we deal with the notion of Jesus Christ being a metaphor for the supreme consciousness? How do we deal with that? From going from this notion of Jesus being like a character to him being a human, or whatever misunderstandings that we may have. How can we go from that and then to a perspective of dealing with him as God? You can worship him as the supreme consciousness, and you can realize that he's never supposed to be seen as anything else. So just the same way that you would embody a prayer or a significant ritual of esoteric worship, the same way you could apply and understand that the way that you traditionally see this guy as this worshipable religious figure, you can now tune in and see him as not the flesh but as the spirit, and you can see him as God, but not in the way that Christians would tell you, like you have to, they would tell you, you have to worship him. Like, it's a different way that they would worship him. They would worship him in this religious way, and they would say that he is God. When you go to a church, they will tell you he is God, but it's not the same way, you know what I mean? It's not the way that they are saying it, but it is the way of the esoteric ancient way. Okay, he is God, but so are you, and that's the distinction. Where if you go to the church, they will tell you, and actually the same with the Hare Krishnas, but anyways, you will go and they will tell you Jesus is God, but they will also tell you you are not. So that's, like I said before, the same thing that we're coming back to is that you are God just as much as he was. So to say that he is God, but you are not, is where the problem is. You have to you have to come to the understanding that we are all equal and we are all part of the divine consciousness, and you are that awareness which is manifesting as Jesus, as Buddha, as yourself, as a squirrel, as a tree, which is why in the previous video, I don't know, it could maybe link it here, it should be here, but in the previous video where I was talking about everything being enlightened, what I was talking about was exactly this, that if everything is this divine God consciousness, then you would have to include all beings as enlightened. In other words, you cannot say that everything is part of this divine consciousness, but that only a few select people are enlightened, if that makes sense. So this conclusion of everything being one divine consciousness also directly makes all beings enlightened a fact. In other words, you just cannot claim that only Gandhi and some other dude is enlightened, but everything is part of this divine consciousness, which is why I say that an ant is just as intelligent, if more intelligent, than any human being that you can pick up from the streets. You will have to see that, like, even an ant, a leaf on the ground, the sunshine right here, everything is and has to be, according to the truth, everything has to be just completely intelligent, because if it's all one intelligence, you cannot exclude any beings, whether it be an ant or a leaf or a palm tree or anything. You cannot just take that out of the equation and be like, no, but that's not intelligent, because only humans. Well, obviously humans aren't intelligent, right? Like, we are so stupid. And if you look at ants, like here in the jungle, if you look at the ants, those leaf ants that they have, that carry the big leaves and they walk in like an army and they build these like fortresses. I mean, these guys, they have a plan, just like you have a goal for your life. And it might seem crazy from your point of view, but if you take a bird's eye perspective and you tune into this actual really large intelligence, you will have the intelligence to see, the capacity to see that, okay, these guys have just as much, like an ant on the ground has just as much a purpose and a dream of life as you have. But it's just that you are in the human advantage, obviously, so you are looking through a certain glass, just like they are, just like a camera. You get a camera and you buy a lens, and the lens is made up of glass. So not only do you have the lens on the camera, but the extended lens is additional glass that you're using, and glass is reflections. So then the freaky thing about it is that Hinduism has their own completely identical theories, not really theories, but they have their completely own identical views of the avatar. So they use the word avatar, obviously, and the way that they say it is, so the way that they say it is, the avatar is the human incarnation of divinity. So they have their own completely identical version to this. And once you put Jesus into that context, you see incredible things about this, because they have a completely similar way of intertwining these stories, and it's kind of fascinating how beautifully these go together. In fact, it's the way that they see it as the incarnation into a human form is no different than the story of Jesus.